Okay, so again, we have our usual format, which is basically grammar, punctuation, and sentence structure for our first part. And then we're doing a long passage for reading comprehension. And then we're going through our vocabulary and our etymology. So let us begin. The construction of a graphic novel. Now, just so you know, a graphic novel has words and pictures. The pictures enhance the words and give more meaning to the story, as opposed to a novel where it's just words without pictures. So understand the difference there. The story begins at my cluttered wooden desk, where I write in whatever space I can clear among the haphazard stacks of sketchbooks, photos, and comics. I jot down notes about characters and plots, collecting recurring images and themes as I go. Eventually, a storyline I can imagine as a graphic novel emerges. I keep scribbling until I've written a full first draft. When I was younger, I preferred stories about superheroes in space. Now, does that last sentence fit in here? Okay, he's talking all about the process of writing a graphic novel. And then suddenly he switches the topic to when he was younger, he preferred superheroes, which is completely irrelevant. Has nothing to do with his process for making a graphic novel. So the question 46 is the writer is considering deleting the preceding sentence. Should the sentence be kept or deleted? Well, the answer is it needs to be deleted because it's completely irrelevant and it interrupts the description of his process for writing a novel, a graphic novel. So let's see what the choices say. Delete it because it doesn't identify any of the superheroes. No, that's wrong. Delete because it interrupts the paragraph's focus on the narrator's writing process. Yes. So J is the right answer. I approach that draft one chapter at a time and carve out the plot, comma, taking away text until only the barest framework had been left. Taking away text. Now look at the question. It's a really good question. This is about what's the best word. Which choice best maintains the carving imagery, like carving a statue or carving a wooden object? The carving imagery introduced earlier in the sentence, okay? I approach it one chapter at a time and carve out the plot. What word is better here than taking away? Whittling away, eliminating, or removing? Well, whittling is the best imagery for carving because a whittler will take a block of wood and a knife, usually a small knife, and just carve away at the wood, forming a statue or an object, shaping it by whittling away the wood. So for a carving imagery, the best choice here is whittling the wood, basically shaving it with a knife and shaping it. Okay, so the right answer to 47 would be B, to maintain the carving imagery text until only the barest framework had been left. Okay, this is past, right? So everything is in present tense. I approach, I carve out, I whittling away. This should be present tense as well. Would have been, was, or is. Which is present tense? The only correct answer is. I think is that a J? Yeah. So you have to keep the tense the same in the sentence. And since everything is in present tense, this has to be in the present tense as well. So the right answer, J, is. You can't go from present to past tense in the same sentence. Once the story is solid, comma, I swivel my chair around and face the gleaming white surface of my tilted drawing table. Okay. Gleaming, comma, white, comma, surface of my tilted, comma. None of these are needed. You have to treat all of this as a single noun. Face the gleaming white surface. Okay? You don't need to separate out with commas here because these are not acting as individual adjectives. The whole is a gleaming white surface. So you can remove these commas, right? Okay. So I face the gleaming white surface of my tilted drawing table. Do you need this comma? Or is that unnecessary? It's completely unnecessary, because drawing table is the noun, tilted is the adjective. You don't separate the adjective from the noun. Okay? The noun is drawing table. Tilted is the adjective. Forget the comma, you don't need it. You don't say he had a happy comma face, right? So when you really look at this, none of these commas are necessary. So if you go down to the choices, this is just a little typo here. It's still a D. That's not an apostrophe. So the only right answer is one without any commas. See all the commas here? So D is the right answer. Gleaming white surface of my tilted drawing table. Okay? So the right answer to 49 is D. Okay. I map out a storyboard, limiting myself to 5 or 6 sentences per page, period. The sentences are accompanied by a series of thumbnails. Series of thumbnails. Do you need this colon? This is a prepositional phrase, of thumbnails. Would you separate the preposition from the object of the preposition with a colon? Of course not. Okay. But you're repeating, you're kind of explaining what a thumbnail is. So you need some kind of punctuation here. Okay. A comma wouldn't necessarily be wrong, but this is wrong. So we can't, no change is not right because the colon's in the wrong place. So what we want is something with no punctuation between of and thumbnails, and something that signifies that we're going to explain what the thumbnail is. So let's look for anything that has no punctuations, and then some kind of a no punctuation here, but some punctuation here to show almost a form of repetition. And the correct answer here is G. Okay? No punctuation between of and thumbnails, but there's a dash indicating that you're about to explicate, explain, expand on something that is connected to thumbnails. So what you would see here is a series of thumbnails dash small panels that I use to experiment with the sequence of images. So the right answer to 50 is G. Okay, we're starting a sentence with because, which is perfectly okay. It's okay to start a sentence with because. Because graphic novels demand such economy of language, comma, I often deviate from a strictly chronological narrative. So this is a dependent clause, starting with because, separated by a comma. This is the main body of the sentence. I deviate from chronological narrative. Subject, verb, object. Dependent clause. So is this wrong? No, it looks pretty right to me. So let's look at the other choices. The reason is that because graphic novels demand such economy, that's poor word structure, and all of this is unnecessary. The reason being that you don't need that. Okay? The reason because, nope. All you need is because. So you want economy of words, and you want this dependent clause to relate to your main sentence. So the correct answer to 51 is no change. Okay? Because it's perfectly fine. You don't need to add all of this verbiage. Okay? All right, let's move on. Where are we here? Okay, here we go. Devoting even a single panel to a flashback of an event in a character's past can reveal a motivation that might have taken a whole page of words to explain. Might have taken. So in other words, the picture can take the place of a whole page of words. Okay, so we gotta decide whether or not this verb form is correct. Something that might have taken, could have taken, perhaps it had taken. If we hadn't used a picture and we had to use words, okay? So this looks correct to me. Might have took, no. When you use have, you have to use the form taken. Okay, you can't have took. Of taken is incorrect. People say that when they're talking, might have taken. It sounds like of, but it's have, might have taken. But I hear a lot of people when they speak, they say it might have taken. Might have taken a long time to get there if the road were closed. But really, the correct form is have taken, not of taken. Might have took. Both of these are wrong. So the only right answer is what it is right here. So in 52, basically it's no change. It might have taken a whole page of words to explain. Okay, a circular panel that features a close-up of a character's shocked face, for example, emphasizes the emotion. It creates an entirely different effect than a rectangle containing a wide view of a character in a crowd. Okay. Which of the following statements would create the most effective transition from the preceding paragraph to this one? Okay. Remember now, we're in a new paragraph, okay? And he's talking about the importance of pictures and how it explains. I enjoy drawing and writing equally. For this reason, the graphic novel is my favorite. The thumbnails become my guide as I then divide blank pages into panels of different shapes and sizes. In my art classes, I learned many techniques to improve my drawing skills. When I'm ready, I move to the next step, mapping out a storyboard. So which of these sentences do you think is the best transition? Devoting a single panel to a flashback of an event in a character's past can reveal a motivation that might have taken a whole page of words to explain. So we have to refer back to these panels, right? A is clearly wrong because it's talking about something that's not relevant to his construction of the graphic novel. B is possible. The thumbnails become my guide as I then divide blank pages into panels of different shapes and sizes. So remember, it's referring to thumbnails, which is in the previous paragraph. In my art class, I learned many techniques. Again, irrelevant. We're not talking here about anything related to how he shapes his novel. When I'm ready, I move on to the next step, mapping out a storyboard. Okay. Let's move on and read here. Okay. So which one do you think is most effective at providing a transition? Basically, the one that refers to thumbnails. Okay, so if we go back to the previous paragraph, a series of thumbnails used to experiment with a sequence of images because graphic novels demand such economy. Okay, and then he's talking about thumbnails, and then he goes on to the next paragraph. The thumbnails become my guide as I divide blank pages into panels of different shapes, a circular panel, and so on. So it's the thumbnails that is providing that transition from the previous paragraph to this. So 53 would be B. Okay. And paragraph transition is important. You don't want to just go to a totally different topic when you start a new paragraph. You want to somehow link it to the previous paragraph. And in this case, it's the thumbnails that does it. Okay. A circular panel that features a close-up of a character's shocked face, for example, emphasizes the emotion. Here's a semicolon showing that the next part of the sentence is going to be closely related to the previous one, but the next part after the semicolon has to be a complete sentence. It creates an entirely different effect than a rectangle containing a wide view of a character in a crowd. So this is a complete sentence. So you can have a semicolon here. That's correct. Now, when you have a noun, it creates an effect. The noun is an E. When you affect something, it can be a verb, or it can be, so, he affected the outcome of the game by screaming, okay? But when something is a noun, you use the E, effect, not affect, okay? What effect did it have on the outcome of the game? I affected the outcome of the game. Okay, so you have to understand if it's a verb or it's a noun. So this is a noun, so you don't want to use an A, you want to use an E. Okay? So the A's are out. Okay? You can either leave it as no change, which means it creates an entirely different effect than a rectangle, or it creates an entirely different effect than a rectangle. The difference between than, which is comparative, comparing one thing to another, and then, which is about time, then is inappropriate here because you are making a comparison between circular and rectangular. So effect than is correct. So 54 is no change. A rectangle containing a wide view of a character in a crowd. I work in pencil at this stage, comma, constantly making adjustments to get each image just right. I tilt the angle of one character's torso to suggest her distrust of the woman sitting next to her, period. Okay. So 55 is right. All of your choices are right. You see that? But you have different punctuation. Okay. Now, the question is, which punctuation here is correct? I work in pencil at this stage, comma, constantly making adjustments to get each image just right. I tilt the angle of one character's torso to suggest her distrust of the woman sitting next to her. Now, you already have a main sentence, right? I work in pencil at this stage. That's your main sentence. I work in pencil. Okay. And this is a dependent clause, constantly making adjustments to get each image just right. Now, if you put a comma here, you've got a run-on sentence. Okay. Because you already got this as a dependent clause. Okay. So what are you going to do with this sentence? For example, I tilt the angle. Again, you got a run-on sentence. If you want to use, for example, what you would do is put a period here, and you'd say, for example, capital F, comma, I tilt the angle of one's character. So you can only have one dependent clause. You can't have run-on dependent clause. Now you can do a, so comma is wrong because it's a run-on sentence. This is a run-on sentence. How about the colon? Does that make sense? I work in pencil at this stage, comma, constantly making adjustments to get each image just right, colon. I tilt the angle of one's character torso to suggest, okay, this is tricky. What follows a colon has to be a list, or it has to be a perfect rendition of what came before. It has to basically be a rewording or an emphasis of what came before. And the colon doesn't belong here because this is not a perfect rendition of getting an image just right. It's an example. So this is a tricky one. The right answer here is basically no punctuation. So I work in pencil at this stage, constantly making adjustments to get each image just right. I tilt the angle of one's character's torso to suggest her distrust of the woman sitting next to her. If the sentence started here, then putting a comma here would be fine. But the sentence doesn't start here, it starts here. And you got to be really careful that you're not creating a run-on sentence. So what you want to do is this whole phrase, you want to make it a dependent clause. And you don't want to separate it out with commas. The only comma you can use is this one here, okay? So the right example, the right answer here, although it seems intuitively wrong, is just to leave out the punctuation in this phrase. So you're creating a dependent clause. The whole thing is a dependent clause, okay? Otherwise, if you start throwing all this in, you're basically creating a run-on sentence. Okay. So 55, the right answer is no change. I sharpen the lines of a character's tightened jaw to give away the anger behind his seemingly polite reply. A characters, some characters, the characters. his is singular, right? Singular third person. A is basically singular. The apostrophe needs to come before the S because this is possessive singular. This is plural, plural, plural. Okay? And when you're referring to his polite reply, you have to use singular. So the right answer to 56 is no change. Each visual detail is as vital to the narrative as any word. So that's just a statement. Okay, paragraph 4. Over the weeks and months, comma, that stack becomes heavy. Its weight a satisfying affirmation of my progress, period. Okay, this is, you can't have a verb here. If you have a verb here in this, its weight is, you're creating a new sentence. And therefore you need to put a period here and capitalize it. Okay, so if you put an is in here, this does not make sense. You have to keep this as a dependent clause. So anything that has is in it is incorrect. Its weight is incorrect because this is it is. It's a contraction of it is. It's not a possessive. So you eliminate these two because you cannot have a verb in here because you'll create a new sentence. And you eliminate this because it's not the possessive. So the only right answer is no change. Over the weeks and months, that stack becomes heavy, comma, its weight a satisfying affirmation of my progress, period. Okay, so 57 is no change. 58. This is a sequence, okay? What they're asking you, which of the following sequences of sentences makes paragraph 4 most logical? Sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3. So we want to start sentence 1 with some kind of a leading overview, right? So let's read all 3 sentences. Over weeks and months, the stack becomes heavy. Its weight a satisfying affirmation of my progress. When I'm ready to fully commit the story to paper, I uncap a pen and then ink every penciled line. The finished pages pile up steadily. Okay. What do you think is the best first sentence here? Okay. When I'm ready to fully commit the story to paper, I uncap a pen and then ink every penciled line. So that would be number 2. When I'm ready, this is what I do. The finished pages pile up steadily. That's what's happening after I start inking the lines. Over weeks and months, the stack becomes heavy. So if you look at it chronologically, when he's ready, he starts inking. The finished pages pile up, and then they become very heavy. So that's the chronological sequence. So the right answer is 2, 3, 1. If you just look at the order in which these things happen, okay? So the right answer to 58 would be H. Okay, 59. The writer is considering adding the following sentence to the essay. I smudge a lamppost to make rain. If the writer were to add this sentence, it would most likely logically be placed at what point? So this is referring to the pictures, okay, that he makes and the little symbols that he puts in his pictures, the little variations to create an image, okay? So let's see whether any of these make sense and relate to his imagery that he's using in his pictures. Remember the sentence, I smudge a lamppost to make rain. We'll go through A, B, C, and D, okay? All right, here's A. Once the story is solid, I swivel my chair around and face the gleaming white surface of my tilted drawing table. The smudge signifies rain. I map out a storyboard. So that doesn't fit in A at all, okay, because he's doing an introduction of his process. He wouldn't be talking about something that specific at this stage. So let's look at B right here. I often deviate from the strictly chronological narrative. I use a smudge to represent rain. Devoting even a single pound to a flashback of an event doesn't fit in there either. Okay, because he's not talking about specifics of imagery. And then we move on to C. Effect has a rectangle containing a wide view of a character in a crowd. I use a smudge to make rain. I work in pencil at this stage, constantly making adjustments to get each image just right. He's talking more here about framing of his pictures, right? And then how he works in pencil and so on and so forth. It's very specifically here talking about rain. So I'm not sure that this really is a detail that belongs here. When you look at D, I sharpen the lines of a character's tightened jaw to give away the anger behind his seemingly polite reply. I use a smudge to represent rain. Each visual detail is as vital to the narrative as any word. This sentence makes D the right answer because the smudge representing rain is a visual detail. And then the sentence describes that, says it's a visual detail. So the right answer to 59, okay, would be D in paragraph 3. I smudge a lamppost to make rain. Each visual detail is important. So the right answer to 59 is D. Suppose the writer's primary purpose had been to analyze various artistic styles of graphic novels. Would this essay accomplish that purpose? Well, his essay is about what he does. It's about his technique and his approach to graphic novels. It's not looking at various artistic styles. It's looking at his style. So the right answer has to be no, but then we have to justify it because it describes instead the narrator's general process for creating a graphic novel. Yeah, that's true. No, because it summarizes rather than analyzes various artistic styles. It doesn't do that. So the right answer is H. For 60, the right answer is H. It addresses specifically his technique and his style for making a graphic novel. Okay? All right, now we move on to the reading comprehension section. This passage is adapted from the article Silence of the Pikas by Wendy Holtkamp. Pikas, a diminutive, that means little, alpine dwelling, that means up in the mountains, rabbit relative, are unique among alpine mammals in that they gather up vegetation throughout summer, including flowers, grasses, leaves, evergreen needles, and even pine cones, and live off the hay pile throughout winter rather than hibernating or moving down slope. So they collect all of the greenery and they pile it up and then they eat it during the winter. Okay. But increasingly warm temperatures may drive them to the brink, to the edge of existence. In other words, it may make them extinct. The high energy mammals can overheat and die at temperatures as mild as 25 degrees Celsius if they can't regulate their body temperature by moving into cooler microclimate under the talus. The talus is a series of stones at the bottom of a cliff, and they can get underneath those stones and cool down. And since they already live near the tops of mountains, when a particular talus field's microclimate becomes inhospitable, in other words, too warm, they simply have nowhere to go. They're already at the top of the mountain. It can't get any cooler than that, right? Sometimes called coney, mouse hair, rock rabbit, or whistling hare, the pika has a narrow niche. People say niche or niche. The British say niche. A niche is basically a biological place where you fit into the ecosystem. Okay? They live only in talus fields, and these must lie adjacent to alpine meadows or other vegetation so they have access to plants for food and hay farming. The talus rock fields must have boulders of a certain size. Scree, a similar habitat with smaller rocks, won't do because the rabbit can't get down underneath them. Rocks provide safe haven from pika's main predator, weasels. But perhaps more important, the interstices between the rocks provide both a cool, moist microclimate where pikas cool down during the hot summer days, and also the perfect sanctuary or safe place in which to settle during the long winter's night. So being between the rocks is good in the summer and in the winter. They don't huddle together like many other mammals, as far as scientists can tell, but remain fiercely territorial and solitary throughout the winter. In other words, they're on their own and they don't want anyone around. They don't want any other pikas around, guarding their hay piles with their lives. As a snowpack settles over the land, it insulates the earth and maintains a certain underground temperature at which pikas can survive, just below freezing. With warming temperatures reducing snowpack in many mountainous areas, in a strange twist of fate, global warming can cause pikas to freeze. So if they don't have the snowpack as an insulation, they can freeze because they're exposed. Which is kind of ironic because if global warming takes away their snowpack, then they're exposed to the wind and to the coldness of the air, and they can freeze from global warming, which is kind of ironic, right? Snow is a great insulator. If you're ever caught in a blizzard and it's very cold and you're going to freeze to death, the best thing you can do is dig a snow tunnel and get it underneath the snow. Because although the snow is cold, it's only 32 degrees, and it actually will insulate you from the colder air above it. Biologists have dubbed mountaintop habitat patches sky islands because the valleys in between are as uninhabitable as the sea for non-mobile alpine species. So they can only live on the mountain. They can't live in the valleys in between. And each mountain is like an island, a biological island. This creates an ideal scenario to test the predictions of one of ecology's key theories, island biogeography. Individual pikas have a relatively limited distance they can disperse, around 2 kilometers, so they really can't move that much. So they can't just shift from one mountain to another. At the population level, they're stuck on a particular mountain range. In the 1990s, biologist Eric Beaver and colleagues surveyed pikas throughout the Hydrographic Great Basin, a heart-shaped 500,000 square kilometer intermontane plateau dotted with 314 mountain ranges, incorporating parts of California, Nevada, Utah, Oregon, Idaho, and Arizona. And were unable to find pikas in 6 of 25 mountain ranges that they had occupied in the late 20th century. So they're disappearing. 6 of the 25 places where they were before, they can't find them. Was the cause of pika extirpations, disappearances, climatic, anthropogenic? Was it due to changes in climate like global warming? Was it due to human beings somehow ruining their habitat? Or was it biogeographical? Was it related to island biogeography? And let's talk about that. Island biogeography theory says that, quote, species are predicted to remain on large islands and islands that are not very isolated from mainland habitat, explains Beaver, who did much of his work while a graduate student under Mary Peacock at the University of Nevada, Reno. He and colleagues found pika populations persisted in mountain ranges with more tailless habitat available, supporting one prediction of island biogeography theory. But pikas were not more likely to persist at sites closer to the Rocky Mountain or Sierra Nevada mainland ranges. So the idea that being closer to the mainland ranges is better for survival turns out not to be true. So this island biogeography theory, part of it is untrue. Okay, because they survive just as well away from the mainland ranges. Here, isolation doesn't have anything to do with whether they're lost or not, Beaver says. Not only that, the sheer size of a mountain range, in this case, isn't very predictive of patterns of loss. And if we count the amount of habitat, that's less important than these climatic influences. Ultimately, the factors most strongly associated with pika disappearances were climatic, changes in the climate, specifically warmer and drier sites, which tended to be lower down the mountains. Of course, the lower you go, the warmer it is. In another study published in Ecological Applications, Beaver University of Colorado researcher Chris Ray and other colleagues revealed that acute cold stress and chronic heat stress, in other words, cold snaps and overall hotter summers, affect pika more than individual very hot days. So if you have prolonged heat over many, many days, that affects them. Or if you have sudden, very cold weather, that affects them. But an occasional hot day does not really affect them. The problem with global warming is that if pikas lose their snowpack, which provides insulation in the winter, they freeze to death. And if the ambient, that means surrounding air temperature, heats up too much in the summer, then they overheat and they cannot reduce their body temperature. That's the challenge, Peacock says, who has studied pika population genetics. They're already at the top of the mountain. If you heat it up substantially, there's no place for them to go. They can't go any higher because they're at the top. So they can't go to a cooler place. If it gets too warm there, they're in trouble. So it's a very peculiar animal, and it lives a very isolated life in a very specific environment with taluses and meadows for food and certain temperature and humidity. And it's a loner. It doesn't travel in packs or huddle together with other animals of the same kind. Primary purpose of the passage is to discuss the methods scientists use to track the numbers of pikas. No, it doesn't really talk about that very much. The role Pika's social behavior plays in their ability to adapt. Well, they're not very social, right? C, causes of Pika disappearances, and scientists propose solutions to the disappearances. I didn't hear a whole lot about solutions. D, habitat and conditions in which Pikas flourish and the cause of the disappearance. Yeah, D. So it tells you what the ideal situation is, and then it talks about possible reasons why they're disappearing and settles on climate as the main reason. So 31 is D. 32, in lines 53 through 55, the author poses a question about the cause of Pika disappearances. All right, so look at 53 through 55. Let's see here, 1, 2, 3. Was the cause of the Pika extirpation disappearances climatic, anthropogenic, or biogeographical? Well, the author goes over here and says, ultimately, the factors most strongly associated with Pika disappearances were climatic. So she does answer it. Okay, she answers the question. F answers the question in paragraphs that follow, yes. Uses to emphasize the extent of Pika disappearance, no. Asks to highlight flaws in Beaver's research, no. Poses to establish the three main results of Pika disappearances. They're not results, they're causes. So the only right answer is F, answers the question in the paragraphs that follow. Okay. All right, question 33. According to the passage, one of Beaver's findings that supports island biogeography theory is Pika populations thrived in most of the mountain ranges that Pikas had occupied in the 20th century. Pika populations endured in mountain ranges with more tailless habitats available. The size of a mountain range correlated with the size of a Pika population. Isolated Pika populations were more likely to survive in varied habitats. So the only answer that makes sense is Pika populations endured in mountain ranges with more tailless habitat available. Okay, Beaver's findings support the island biogeography theory. With more tailless habitats available. See, it's right there. That supports the biogeographical theory. So B is just basically a restatement of what's in the passage. So B is the correct answer. According to the passage, the study published in Ecological Applications indicates that a Pika population is most stressed by a summer with a higher than average amount of rainfall. No, it doesn't even mention that. Several individual very hot days, overall hotter temperatures, slightly cooler temperatures. Overall hotter temperatures. Remember, it said prolonged heat, not isolated days, but prolonged heat. So the right answer to 34 should be H, overall hotter temperatures for 34. It can most reasonably be inferred, that means concluded from the passage, that one reason Pikas easily overheat is that they become overwhelmed by a thick snowpack. No, snowpack helps them in winter so they don't freeze. Are a high energy animal, it does say that. Huddle together in interstices, insulate themselves inside hay piles. Well, they don't do that. They don't huddle together. Snowpack is the wrong answer. So high energy mammal is the correct answer. And it does say at the beginning of the passage that they're a very high energy mammal. So they do produce a lot of heat. And if it's hot around them, they have trouble cooling their body temperature. So 35 is B is the correct answer. 36, the passage indicates that compared to a tailless field, scree habitats Remember, talus has bigger boulders that they can get under and get between. The scree has smaller boulders, smaller rocks. So the right answer is H, smaller rocks. So understand the difference between a talus and a scree. Both of them are at the bottom of a cliff or at the edge of a cliff, but the scree has smaller rocks than the talus. Okay. 37. The passage indicates that the perfect sanctuary for a pika on a long winter night is located on a hay pile, doesn't say anything about that, in an alpine meadow, no, because they'll freeze out there. On the top of a mountain adjacent to a tail, no, because they'll freeze. In the interstices between rocks in an alpine talus field, that's where they hide. They go between the rocks, okay, and that insulates them from the wind and exposure to the cold, and their body heat will probably help keep them warm, and the snowpack will also help keep them warm. Okay, so the right answer is D, in the interstices between rocks. In the passage, the behavior of pikas during winter is characterized in part as fiercely territorial. Yes, remember it said that? They don't huddle together, they're loners, and they're fiercely territorial. They protect their food with their lives. None of these other ones apply. Fiercely territorial. I think you even see that in the writing here. It even uses the expression fiercely territorial. Remain fiercely territorial. There it is. Okay, so it gives, when you go back to the past and you see the exact same word, that's usually a very good sign. So 38 is F. 39, the passage states that biologists dub mountaintop habitat patches sky islands because in between the islands, there's no life. Any species that survive on mountaintops are completely cut off from the rest of the mountain. The mountaintop's altitude makes them a haven for most species. That's not true. Most is, that's definitely not true. The valleys between mountaintops are as uninhabitable as the sea would be for non-mobile alpine species. That's the right answer. And that comes right out of the passage. So they got to stay at the top of the mountain because if they go down between the mountains and the valleys, they will die. It would be like drowning in the ocean. So 39 is C. 40, it can most reasonably be concluded, inferred from the passage, that as compared to pika populations on the top of a mountain, those at lower mountain elevations are more likely to disappear, thrive, remain unchanged, migrate to another mountain. They don't migrate to other mountain ranges. Remember, they move in a very limited area, but they'll disappear because it'll get warmer and they won't be able to survive. So global warming affects you more at lower altitudes. So if they're further down the mountain, they're more likely to disappear. So the right answer to 40 is F. Okay, so we got through the reading comprehension. That was a fairly technical passage and a lot of details there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see here. Stop share. And hopefully we have our vocabulary list. Good. And here we go. Our list is right here. Just okay. The first word on our list is haphazard. And does anyone know what haphazard means? Something that's haphazard is lacking in any order or principle of organization, totally random. The clothes were scattered about the bedroom in a haphazard fashion, just kind of threw pants here, shirt there, no organization at all, totally haphazard. Okay, what is a brink? Anybody? A brink is the edge of land before a steep drop off. So it's like the edge of a cliff, right? But also it's a point when usually something bad is about to happen. So let's say the company's losing money every day. It's on the brink of bankruptcy. It's at the point where something is about to happen. It's about to become bankrupt. So it's on the brink. Okay, talus. We talked about talus. Can anyone tell me what a talus is? Well, there's two things that a talus is. One of them is a bone in your foot. The talus bone, your tibia, which is your lower leg bone, rests on top of the talus. And the reason they call it a talus is because it looks like a rock. But the definition for our article is a sloping mass of rock fragments at the foot of a cliff. And remember, the talus, the rocks are bigger, and with a scree, they're smaller. Okay, interstice. An interstice is an intervening space between two things. So in this case, in our article, interstice between the rocks is that little space between two rocks where the rabbit hides. Okay, extirpation. Anyone know what extirpation is?
Isn't it like taking away, removing, destroying something?
Yes, exactly. To destroy it, to root it out, rip out the roots, to cut it out surgically. They also use that word extirpation when they talk about cutting out a tumor. They extirpated the tumor. They removed it. Okay, so you're right, to destroy it or remove it. Anthropogenic. What do you think that word means? And
Pollution?
yeah, exact. Pollution is made by people. So anything resulting from the influence of people on nature. So something that's anthropogenic is caused by people. Pollution would be caused by people. The depletion of resources would be caused by people. So that would be anthropogenic. Equanimity. What is equanimity? It's good to maintain your equanimity in all situations.
Like being calm.
Exactly right, especially under stress. Being mentally balanced and having even emotions, being clear-headed, staying calm under stress, equanimity. Equivocal, something that's equivocal. What does equivocal mean?
Open-minded, kind of.
It means you can't really decide. It's like subject to two or more interpretations. Uncertain. The fact that she had a high fever was an equivocal sign. We weren't sure if it meant she was getting better or getting worse. Something that's equivocal is hard to interpret. It's kind of like, could go either way. It's equivocal. To espouse something. What does it mean to espouse something?
Support.
Yeah, to take it up and support it. He espoused the rights of fishermen to fish for lobster. He took up the cause and supported it, became attached to that cause, espoused it. And evanescent, beautiful word, evanescent. What does it mean when something is evanescent? It's something that tends to vanish like vapor. It comes and goes really quickly. So, like the morning sun on this cloudy gray day was evanescent, came for a second, then it disappeared. Or the smell of her perfume as she walked by was evanescent. I smelled it for like just a second and then it was gone. It's a beautiful word, evanescent. Okay, so our etymology today is going to be anthropogenic, and anthropo is ancient Greek for human. Genic is to produce something, or to make it, or to cause it. So caused by humans, anthropogenic. Pollution is caused by humans, overcrowding by humans, depletion of resources by humans. Okay? So break that word down and you have two Greek words, anthropo and gen, to make or produce humans, humans making or producing. Now, what are the other words that you could think of that have anthropo? Well, anthropology. Anthropology is a study of humans, right? What about misanthrope? Misanthrope. Mis, M-I-S, anthrope with an E here. And a misanthrope hates humans. If you're a misanthrope, you hate people. So you'll say, he was a recluse who hid in his castle He was a misanthrope. He hated people and didn't want to see them. Okay, so there's another example of misanthrope. And the other one is anthropomorphic. And you'll see anthropomorphic when you talk about literature. Morph means shape. Anthropo is human, taking human shape. So when you write about an animal as if it were a person, Roger the dog preferred his breakfast at 9 a.m. He wore a bib and he always ate his scrambled eggs first with his fork and then ate his biscuits between his paws. You're turning the dog into a person the way you describe him. So you're doing an anthropomorphic description. Okay? So those are different examples of anthropo where you'll see it. It means human. Anthropology, anthropomorphic, misanthrope. Okay. The next word we're going to do is evanescent because I love that word, evanescent. Now this comes from the Latin vanescere, which means to disappear, to vanish. So the modern word vanish comes from the Latin vanescere, which is to disappear. Okay? So the E just means out from which this happens, from the time it disappears. And we said evanescent is something that comes and goes quickly. So it disappears. Okay? And believe it or not, something that is empty is related to this word. So if something vanishes, it leaves nothing in its place, right? Which is emptiness. So you have words like vacate, to leave something empty, or vacant, or vacuum, to empty something, right? Suck it out. Or evacuate, get people out of a space. And this is related to vanescere. Okay? When something disappears, it leaves an empty space. Okay? So evanescent comes from the Latin word for vanish or disappear. And it comes and goes quickly. Okay, guys, that's our etymology, and I think we're all done for the night. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, sounds good, guys. We will see you next Tuesday night. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.